Hello and welcome to part 2, continuing on with, of course, our Quicks14 blog of Visual Basic.NET game design and programming with the dialogue class. So, what you're really seeing behind, or what you're seeing, is basically me introducing the new dialogue class into not only the engine side for where we can have it show up and do our first tests with it, but also the very basics of how it's going to work and show up in that process. Right now, working on a new, basically a new sub here that you can see called dialogue input, and I'll go more in detail in it from the actual recording here a little later. But in essence, this is going to be the sub that's going to actually run and do decisions based on when those dialogues are up, when they're called. So you'll see that at least for this part, and for most of probably for the next part as well, as we're going through this, how that's going to evolve and how that it's changed and updated. There's also a few other fixes that you'll also see coming up as well, to some of the more mundane and redundant things I've been doing quite a bit, especially when it comes to the actual rectangles for doing buttons and stuff that you can see right there. So that's kind of what you're going to be able to see. And I'm skipping a lot of footage here because there's just a lot of coding. There was, of course, a ton of coding in order before I can even get it set up there. The good news is as you'll see, is once the little tweaks and getting it set up properly and implemented where it's supposed to be was done, it actually worked quite well. So it was a great start, and that comes down to planning, having a basic idea of the flow of how things are going to work, what you're going to need to do it, what's going to be on there, just that time it takes to do planning. Even the very basic stuff is going to save you a lot of headaches later. As you've seen, when I do a lot of stuff on the fly, it seems to take longer and I seem to have bigger errors. And this is just true of anything when dealing with programming. Anything that you do on the fly can potentially have problems unless you actually think about it and plan it out, whether that's on paper or in your head, on a whiteboard, whatever. So take the time, if you're a programmer or aspiring programmer or learning to code or whatever, take the time to plan it out. Even a little bit is going to help. The more in depth you go, the better. And if you're working with a team, the more in depth you need to go because they can't read your mind. So make sure you do that. But just planning it out will not only help get your thoughts out and little tweaks and the logic what you were thinking when it was, so if you stop it for some reason and come back to it, you know where you left off on it. But more importantly, it'll let you know what you were thinking and stuff like that. So using, if you have never used flowcharts, hierarchy, or class diagrams or pseudocode before, ever before, which I know I never did until I really started college, learn. Just play with it. You know, when you're approaching a problem or an idea that you have, just take a few minutes to scribble it down. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. Just put in something you can understand. That's probably the best way to start, since you're the only one that's going to see it, and you can expand it from there. And of course, as you're working with a team, it becomes so much easier to do that because everyone can see your logic and everything, even if they don't understand your code or understand the code. You know, if I showed a C# programmer my flowchart for VB.NET and he knows nothing about VB.NET, he would still understand the logic of what I'm doing with this, even though he may not get the entire code, and vice versa. So that's the power of flowcharts and diagrams and things of that nature. It just helps with flow and of course order and structure and logic. So, but that's just a little quips about that. But let's go back into the actual class dialogue and a little bit more about it and basically what we just did here. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the actual commentary from the recording. Alright, so basically what we've done here is we've put this in the engine as a simple sub. A couple things I want to just mention. All it's going to do basically when this is ran is it's going to, since we're doing them as privates here in Form 1, we're going to ship them off to our engine through the through the little dialog input here, these two to the RPG engine by reference. Now, by reference works a lot differently than by val. By val makes a brand new variable in memory, basically, and it's essentially a copy. So you can do whatever you want to it in any manipulation, etc., and it won't hurt the original. It's just a copy. In this case, by reference doesn't do that. It doesn't make a brand new variable in memory. It uses the same memory location if it is. So even with private variables and even between different subs and things of that nature, if you pass it along, and as long as it's still in memory, it's going to find here. So by reference can be dangerous. It can cause problems. You got to be very careful with it. So we're simply shipping these off by reference. So we're doing it by memory without having to turn our private variables that are on form 1 into publics. So that's kind of nice. Just simple, it does a check to see if the dialog is visible. If it is, it's going to go ahead and do our dialog draw that we set up. Most of the time right now it should be, so it will come up just fine. After that, right now we're just doing a select case, and right now we're just doing for our confirmation box to get input. It's going to set up some statics for our rectangles so we can check for button clicks. Right now I'm not even animating this right now. This is just basic stuff. So if I click on yes, it confirms as it is yes. Right now it just sets it as 6 for our counter, and then it gets rid of the dialog. No brings the counter back to 1, and cancel, if it's being used, also gets set back to 1. And after all of it's done and it's changed, it automatically just dumps the dialog, because we don't need it no more. So we don't need it in memory anymore, so we can clear it out and make way for the new temporary use dialog. It should hopefully work out pretty well. I'm not sure yet. We'll have to wait and see. The only way to find out, of course, is to test it and see what happens. I think we're ready for that, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot. Obviously, we can add some more for what happens to the state. This is just a basic reference, a basic start to our sub and how it's going to work. So we'll go ahead and give it a try. We'll see what happens. At least, if nothing else, we can at least find out. Okay, I messed up. I have to check something. Yep, something went wrong here. Alright, let me stop this. I gotta check something, because we did make some modifications to our cases and stuff of that nature. Also counter 5. Okay. Lord. You gotta love it when things fight with you. I'm not 100% sure what's wrong here. It's gotta be here. Something's wrong here. And it must be for the GUI check, because I set it up so if counter equals 5, then it's going to run the dialog input. Otherwise it's supposed to do the GUI check, and I kind of screwed around with that, so now it's really not doing it, apparently. And actually I think I might have missed something with the title screen. That's possible. Oh yes, I did, because we're incrementing the counter. So let me just quickly add a little caveat for now. And game state is not equal to title. There we go. Because the title loads and it goes through it and it does that, and that's why I got stuck during the loading process. We saw a nice blue screen, which means nothing was being drawn. So let's try that again. That's why we test it. So now it loaded okay. That's what we like to see. Of course, new game, blah blah blah. So now when we click exit game, there's our dialog. Now right now nothing's being drawn behind it because of the way we have it set up, and it's definitely not in the right position. But as we can see, it definitely looks good, and it looks like it worked okay. It looks like it's going great. We just got to do a few little extra tweaks and stuff. Cancel should not be there, should not be being drawn. I'll have to check my draw state, but otherwise it looks good. Whoops. Well, that didn't quite work right. So little things to check and tweak, I guess, but encouraging nonetheless. It's definitely a start to what we want to do. All we got to do is do it. In fact, we actually need GUI check to run, and that's probably why that happened. So I'm actually going to change this up a little bit, and I know this is going to stop recording and go to a new video here in just a second. So I'm going to watch it carefully. We're actually going to change this up a little bit to just this. P dialog is not equal to nothing. So as long as, oh, geez, it's going to give me